Hello, class. Well, welcome to our last class. As sad as that is, I know there'll be some more, and I know I'll keep in touch with you guys. So, for this class, it's going to be quite a challenge. We're going to discuss the architectural styles of two architects, leading architects in the world. The first one is Frank Gehry, another Frank, very, very different style than Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Gehry is actually a Canadian-born American architect, resides in Los Angeles. Zaha Hadid is actually an Iraqi British subject. She was born in Iraq, migrated to London, and her home was London. Unfortunately, she passed away here a couple of years ago. But we're going to talk about Frank Gehry here for our first part of the class. Again, Frank, very interesting character, very, very different than Frank Lloyd Wright. Okay, and you're going to see some very interesting things. Frank Gehry was around a lot of artists, so he sees architecture as art. This is some of his work here. You might be familiar with this piece of work. This is the Disney Concert Hall, down in LA. He did these very, very interesting sort of strange, I don't know what you'd call them, basic shapes, just free-flowing artistic shapes is sort of his architectural style. One of the pieces of work which you may be familiar with, I know you've probably seen it off the freeway, don't know it was Frank Gehry's, is this. This is the Disneyland's administrative building right off the Santa Ana freeway. You go by, has that very translucent, kind of interesting, right as you pass Disneyland. Anyway, that's one of Frank Gehry's work. So there's a lot of his work in Los Angeles. This is what this administrative building looks like on the other side, on the parking lot on the employee side. Again, as you can tell, the shapes are very convoluted, very free form, almost chaotic in some way. He does get criticized for some of his work being a little too maybe comical or not structured, but you can see there's no, other than the windows, there's no real linear pattern. Nothing is just straight up and down or sideways for his work. And again, he relies on these sort of metal pieces in here that can be almost like sheet, almost like a car, how a car is designed. Okay, so this is one of his pieces of work. Another piece of his work and interesting part of his character are scale models. He's really, really well known for building these really interesting scale models. And if you look closely, you can tell that they're really kind of a sketch. You can see the proportions of people, and he just sort of cuts these up and puts them together. So he's not so concerned, especially in the beginning phases of a concept, that it has to look perfect. He's really exploring shapes and ideas, and he cuts things up sort of radically, and he makes these shapes. Another good example of the type of work that he does a series of models. So if it's a skyscraper, if it's a whatever building it is, I believe he's even done the Anaheim the Ducks, the hockey team. He's really into hockey. He did their practice rink. So he's done a lot of pieces of work in LA. But one of his character, other than his really convoluted shapes, like you see here a little bit, but he does a series of models. Now this is wood, which means he's just checking out proportions. This has sort of a metal look to it. You're gonna hear some of that free-forming kind of surfacing that he kind of mixes things up with. This is white. As you can tell, it's all these different textures, materials, all wrapped around this one skyscraper concept. So he does a lot of models, just a lot of very, very creative ideas, okay? So we're gonna talk about him. And the first piece of work we're gonna look at that he did, again, as we go back here, was the Disneyland Concert Hall. Okay, so that's the piece we're gonna work with. And the other thing we're gonna talk about is this very interesting style of sketching. Again, this is very different than what we've been practicing, but it's got a really interesting technique to it. I think you'll enjoy it. And but first, before we get to this assignment, I'm going to have you look at a video, a BBS News Hire video that is looking back at Frank Gehry's building pending feats. I think it's only about 5 or 6 minutes, but it's a good video on his